Good evening and welcome to Artist Books at 50. Tony White in conversation with Dianne Vanderlip. We are very excited about tonight's program and so happy you could join us for what I'm sure will be a very rich discussion. My name is Rick Sieber, and I'm the director of the Connolly Library here at Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia. Tonight's event celebrates the 50th anniversary of an influential exhibition held in the galleries here at Moore. The name of the exhibition, Artists' Books, marks the first use of this pivotal phrase in the contemporary context. And the curator of this exhibition and the coiner of the now ubiquitous phrase Artists' Books was Dianne Vanderlip, who we are very honored to have with us this evening and whom I will introduce more thoroughly momentarily. We became aware of this significant anniversary through the scholarly work of Tony White, who we are also honored to welcome this evening. His talk, After Artist Books, which was presented to the Book Club of California, inspired Moore's Chair of Fine Arts, Oscar Goto, to seek more information about the show here at the Connolly Library, which got us thinking, and along with our instructional technology and online learning coordinator, Tanya Lee, we began to think of ways to commemorate this historic event. This eventually led to a book installation here at Moore, featuring a sampling of some of the items that appeared in the original show, as well as tonight's keynote event. It made sense to bring together the originator of the show and a scholar of the show to talk about it and share it out widely to everyone to celebrate this anniversary. Katie Garth, who also joins us this evening, is a printmaker, artist, and educator who is currently teaching an artist's book course at Moore. And she was the person who originally alerted Oscar to Tony's talk. So she kind of set the whole thing in motion. She coordinated the arrangements for tonight's webinar, designed our amazing logo, which you can see on the screen right now, and she will serve as the evening's moderator for the Q&A that will follow the discussion. Along with everyone else I've already mentioned, I'd like to thank our many partners in bringing this event to fruition, the dedicated staff of the Connolly Library, Maya Hodge and Melody Totten, our audio-visual support for this evening, Claire Devlin and Moore's IT team as a whole, and our promotional partners who, along with Moore's marketing department, help spread the word about this event, the College Book Art Association, Center for Book Arts, Printed Matter, Art Library Society of North America. We thank you all for spreading the word and bringing together this group of artist books aficionados to learn more about kind of the legacy of this show. Before I get to the introduction of our distinguished guests, I would like to give a quick overview of tonight's agenda. After the introductions, Tony will provide a short presentation to put Dianne Vanderlip's exhibition in context to the field of artist books more broadly, before commencing a conversation with Dianne that will explore the origins of the show and its legacy. Should be very interesting discussion. And finally, after the discussion, Katie will moderate a Q&A, and Tony and Dianne will be happy to answer audience questions. So now it is my honor to introduce our distinguished guests. Dianne Perry Vanderlip started her career in 1967 when she and her husband, architect Jay Vanderlip, started the Vanderlip Gallery here in Philadelphia. She then became the founding director at the Moore College of Art Gallery in Philadelphia, where she organized over 50 exhibitions, including the very first Alice Neel retrospective in 1971, Alice Neel being a notable Moore alum, and of course the Artist Books exhibition that we are featuring tonight. Following her time at Moore, in 1979, she became the founding curator of modern and contemporary art for the Denver Art Museum, again, a founder, where she built a renowned collection numbering more than 8,000 works of painting, sculpture, videos, and photography, including works ranging from Marcel Duchamp to Carrie James Marshall. During her extensive curatorial career, Dianne has organized prominent art exhibitions across the US and Europe, both before and after moving to Los Angeles, where she also worked for the Gagosian Gallery. Dianne has served on numerous national art panels, including the National Endowment for the Arts. She was a longtime board member of the Fabric Workshop here in Philadelphia, is a member of the International Association of Art Critics, and was a founding member of the Federal Commission for International Exhibitions. And in January of 2007, after 30 years at the Denver Art Museum, Vanderlip retired from her position as curator and was awarded the title of Curator Emeritus, a title that had never been bestowed by the institution. So she, again, was a pioneer, the first curator emeritus for the Denver Art Museum. Her other honors include an award from the National Museum of Women in the Arts, the 2007 Colorado Governor's Award for Excellence in the Arts, and the 2011 Bonfield Stanton Artists Award. She is currently a collections advisor and lives in Los Angeles. Welcome, Dianne.
Thank you. I can tell you how excited I am to be here. Thank you.
We're very excited to have you. And joining Dianne in conversation is Tony White. Tony White is the library director of Purchase College, the State University of New York. His previous positions include working as university librarian at the Dorothy H. Hoover Library at OCAD University in Toronto, the Florence and Herbert Irving Associate Chief Librarian at the Thomas J. Watson Library at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Director of Decker Library at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Tony was the first appointed field editor for Artists' Books and Books for Artists for the College Art Association's online reviews journal, and he has curated many exhibitions on artist books and artist publishing. He is a founding board member of the College Book Art Association, and he also founded the Contemporary Artist Books Conference in New York City, which he co-organized from its inception in 2008 until 2018. For 3 years, he served on the editorial board of the Journal of Artist Books, and he has published many articles, catalogs, essays, and books chapters on artist books, artist publishing, and topics in art librarianship. His recent publications include After Artists' Books for the Book Club of California Quarterly, the article and talk which was the catalyst for tonight's event, and a catalog essay in The Art of Making Books, American and Italian Artists' Books from the Liliana De Mattias collection at the Thomas J. Watson Library, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. His forthcoming work includes an article taking a deeper look at Dianne Vanderlip's Artists' Books exhibition catalog, as well as book chapters on collection development and extra illustrated books. Books. Tony has taught many studio courses pertaining to artist books, and since 2018, he has taught a course at the University of Virginia's Rare Book School titled The History of Artist Books since 1950. He will again be teaching this course in July 2024 in New York City. Welcome, Tony, and again, welcome, Dianne. We look forward to hearing from you both. So, I tried to condense it. You guys have extensive careers. Anyway, welcome, Tony, and again, welcome, Dianne. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Tony for a brief presentation contextualizing the exhibit.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. All right. Whoop. Oh, no. Well, there's the preview. So I just quickly wanted to thank the library staff at Moore College of Art. As Rick said, I was there early in the year, and Rick and Maria and Melody and Tonya were super helpful in terms of my access to the archives and also some early images that I used for kind of reaching out to Dianne later that relate to some of the exhibition materials that I'll show you. And also to Asuka Goto and Katie Garth. We had some really great conversations about getting to this point and how to celebrate this and how to have a conversation with Dianne to really promote the collections and Moore College of Art and really to have a conversation about artist books. I also just quickly want to give a shout out to New York Public Library that provided me with a research writing space for this last year where I wrote and did a lot of the research for this article. And also thanks to the provost at OCAD University for giving me my first sabbatical to do some writing. So to set the stage, really to have a context without, just in a few minutes, right before Dianne's exhibition of artist books in 1973, Germano Chirlant had curated an exhibition in 1972 titled Book as Artwork. And really this was looking at the post-war environment in terms of what were artists doing in terms of publications coming out of material culture, painting and sculpture and photography, and kind of moving into the beats and more conceptual work with Fluxus artists, happenings, performance art, and these sorts of things, and really taking a look at art povera and conceptual works in the United States and trying to have a conversation about it, recognizing that there were some really significant publications and kind of excitement around artist publications as a kind of a new area of contemporary art. And so we curated this exhibition following an article that he wrote in Data Magazine, listing some 250 works in the catalog. The same year, on almost the other side of the world, in Los Angeles, the librarian at Otis College of Art curated an exhibition titled Possibilities. And in this exhibition, she really looked at everything from livre d'artiste all the way to the present, looking at various kinds of illustrated, super illustrated, and conceptual books all the way up until 1972. And she suggested that the descriptor for these books be called artist publishing, which is very prescient because in the early part of this century, there was a shift to artist publishing in terms of describing artist books. But in 1973, Dianne curated the now famous exhibition Artist Books and used it as a descriptor for the similar kinds of publications that were discussed in both the Chalant and the Hugo catalogs. But for those of you that like to read exhibition catalogs and look at exhibition checklists, you'll note that in the Chalant catalog, there were 250 titles, as I mentioned. Vanderlip included 144 titles in her exhibition, and Joan Hugo included 82. The title overlap among the three exhibitions was actually very low. Between the Chalant and Vanderlip, there were only 32 titles that overlapped among those exhibitions. There were only 2 between Hugo and Chalant, and only 1 between Hugo and Vanderlip's exhibition. So all of these curators are looking at a wide variety of materials. Many of the works are overlapping, and each one is attempting to describe the kinds of works that they're seeing artists creating in the previous 10 to 15 years, and just trying to describe it and draw attention to it and celebrate it in terms of the kinds of publications. Also at this time, as was common, and you see this certainly through the 1960s and into the 1970s, oftentimes when there was an exhibition of artist books, curators received subventions or grant monies or something to pay for publication of an artist book. In this case, Dianne worked with Klaus Oldenburg and made an extended or expanded version of his 1960 mimeograph publication, Ray Gun Poems. And this is more Ray Gun Poems, which is kind of the landscape format. If you go to New York Public Library, you can see they have original pages in this landscape format that are not folded and that are full spread. They're actually really quite amazing to see. So what I thought I'd do is share with you, in the last couple of months, Dianne and I have been in conversation and correspondence, and she's been really great at sharing, at digging through and kind of looking back 50 years and saying, what do I have that we can share and have a conversation about? And what's really amazing is that up until now, I've been writing about the catalog for about 10 years after seeing it in Stefan Klima's book, the artist books, looking at the critical literature, but I've never seen photographs of the exhibition and the installation. So here's a contact sheet. And then here are several installation photographs without people. And you'll notice here in the center, there are a number of artist books that are hanging by wire. And these are Ed Ruscha's books. Dianne really was trying to tackle the issue of artist books, under glass being a vexing presentation style, and really trying to allow opportunities for visitor engagement with the books, because inherently artist books are meant to be handled. The challenge is when gallery visitors handle artist books quite regularly, they oftentimes destroy or mess them up in one fashion or another. Here's another view of that with the artist books hanging from the ceiling. And then here are a number of artist books also attached to the wall. So we have them under glass, hanging from a wire and attached to the wall, really trying to be innovative and making the materials available. And I think this is really great because in later years and successive decades, you see similar presentations as curators are trying to make the works available and not always having them under glass. And then here is one of the images from the opening, and you'll notice Lucas Samaras' book from Pace Editions. This is Pace Editions' first sculptural multiple, and here it is front and center among the exhibition crowd. Here's a really great picture of Dianne talking to Klaus Oldenburg, and you'll note here he's holding his More Ray Gun poems and a copy of the exhibition catalog at the opening. And then here, this might be a touch point for later conversation, is Charles Chuck Phelan, which came up in conversation. And then for those of you who knew Italo Scanga, as he was really kind of getting into the studio glass movement here in the United States, working with Dale Chihuly and others, but he's also was a painter and a printmaker and whatnot. Here he is in conversation with Chuck. And then here's the last photograph I have. This is John Perrault. He authored one of the essays in the catalog. And he was a kind of an artist, a poet, and a writer in his own right. And I believe at the time he was also the art critic for the Village Voice. And here he is with Dianne in conversation at the opening. So, and then I just have a couple more images. This is, so after the Artist Books exhibition, the exhibition was reviewed 4 times. And for those of you who've seen the catalog, you open up the exhibition catalog and it says Philadelphia and then Berkeley as the 2 travel places. But what also happened at the time is that between the shift from Philadelphia to Berkeley, there was a layover or a stopover at the Pratt Graphic Center in New York City. And that's where where you can find one of the reviews. And then at the time, shortly after this, about that time, Visual Studies Workshop was founded in 1972. The Women's Building in Los Angeles was formed shortly thereafter. Art Metropole was founded to sell and distribute artist books using the phrase from her catalog. And then a couple of years later, Printed Matter was founded in 1976. First to print and sell artist books, and they quickly realized there was no money in that. So they quickly incorporated and formed a not-for-profit so they could maintain their business model. Also at about that same time, Artwright magazine, issue 1112, that has this little gargoyle on the front that was actually designed by Ed Ruscha. They put a call out to artists and others in the community to describe or define what artist books were or what they could be, or have you heard about this phrase, artist books, and what are they? And then in issue 14 of Artwright, they published 50 of these responses about what artists think artist books are. The first entry is by Kathy Acker, and the last entry is by Rachel Yodelman. And it's everybody in between, John Baldessari, you can see Peter Downsborough, Judy Hoffberg, Alan Capro, Richard Kostelinetz, and many others sharing their ideas about what artist books are. And a few people say artist books are not artist books, but most kind of dwell on and explore the materials. And this last exhibition I just want to share. So all through the 1970s, we start with book as artwork, and then we have artist publications, and then we have artist books. And then later and throughout the 70s and even into the 1980s and beyond, a number of people position that these creative publications by artists ought to be called book works. And you see this kind of this time during the 1970s of trying to establish what to call these materials that artists are making. And then eventually artist books as a phrase takes hold. And many of us understand it now as a genre of contemporary art and kind of take for granted when it was founded and when it was coined. So I think this is a good place to start our conversation. And let me stop the presentation. So one of the first questions I thought we'd start with the specific and go to the general. And I think one of the questions that comes up is why artist books, and how did you come to it, and who were you in conversation with, or what were you seeing at the time, or what led you to come up with the phrase artist books?
Well, it's kind of a no-brainer. There were artists and they were making books. So it's pretty simple. I called it artist books.
Sure. And at the time you'd mentioned that you were in conversation with Chuck Phelan as well in printmaking, and that you've been having some conversations about the kinds of works you were seeing.
Well, Chuck was a very significant artist in Philadelphia and a professor at the Moore College of Art. And he was making some artist books himself. And he showed me the first one that he made, which was called How Does This Look to You? And it was kind of goofy, and I probably laughed at it. because I was thinking of the book that Lucas Samaras had just made at Pace. Yeah. And I was and am still a great admirer of Samaras and his originality. And that probably led to a conversation with Chuck that really got us going on this. And Chuck was from California. He'd gone to Otis as well. Grew up in San Francisco. And so he knew about a lot of things that were going on the West Coast with artist books. So we just, kind of kept talking and kept looking. And other artists in Philadelphia at Moore, Jerry Crimmins and Tom Chimes, those guys were all also making artist books. So it was just a thing that was going on because of the time. Pop art was over, AE was over. The society was really in a jumble. Nobody knew what was going on. And, the artist book, you could just sit there and make a book.
Right. And have engagement with it. Were you also, in terms of your curatorial vision for the exhibition, was it really about, because one of the things that we discussed was also your network, right? And so there are 144 books in the exhibition. If looking at the catalog, I think you loaned a couple, a lot of the faculty locally loaned some works, but really the reach was across the country. Can you talk a little bit about how you, how you developed your network of friends and friends of friends to cultivate works that were included in the exhibition?
I think it's interesting that you often refer to my vision. I didn't have a vision. I was kind of too young to know what to sweat. So I just, and the resources that we had were so minimal that, we just kind of did what we could do. And of course, as everybody knows, those times were very, very different. And you didn't make friends by, going online or TikTok or whatever. You met friends by going to a party, going to a bar, working with your colleagues, and they knew somebody and they would introduce you to somebody else. And as I just said, Chuck Fallen introduced me to a lot of the artists on the West Coast. And I spent a lot of time, I must admit, at Max's Kansas City in New York. And at Max's, you could meet everybody. You could meet the other curators, from the Whitney was very, very hot then, and the other museums. And I was very, very young, so it was very easy to just go up and say, "Hi, what do you do?" While I was, kind of leaning on John Chamberlain's foam sculpture, and then John comes up and says, "You're on my sculpture," and I thought, "Oh my God, you're John Chamberlain." So it was, it was that kind of thing. I presume and I hope that kind of interchange still happens with artists today. I suspect it isn't quite as intense as it was 50 years ago, but that's how the network started. Well, actually, you and I have talked about this. There was no such term as network when this was. It was just, you had friends.
Right. Well, and I also like the, because there was no internet and there's no social media and these sorts of things. And so you're socializing in bars, but you're also using the telephone and the phone book and finding people that way. I think you shared that was one of the ways you made a connection with John Cage. And presumably you did that with others as well.
Yeah, the one with John was very interesting because, and people would dare me to do things. And somebody probably dared me to call John Cage. And I just looked him up, and there he was in the New York phone book, which even shocked me. What shocked me more was when I dialed his number, he answered the phone. And we became good friends, he and I and Merce Cunningham. And I invited John to speak to lecture at the Moore College of Art, because we had a really significant lecture program going there. And I was so starstruck that when he got up on stage, I was, of course, supposed to introduce him, and I'm standing there. And now I would like to introduce, and I went totally blank. And John, bless his heart, he jumped up on the stage and said, "I'm John Cage." And that was just part of the John Cage story. But those things happened a lot because I was so young and I really didn't know what I was doing. You know much more about me, Tony, than I do. You're a tremendous researcher and art scholar, and I am certainly not a scholar, but I make friends very easily.
Wow, you made friends and you had great networks, and it sounds like you were dared as well.
Yeah.
In terms of the exhibition catalog, I know that I touched base with Lynn Hirschman just briefly. She was traveling, so our communications by short texts. But she'd mentioned that that you paid both her and John $50 for the essays, and when you were in communication with them, do you remember what your remit was in terms of, I'm doing a catalog? Will you write an essay?
That was probably just about it. I'm doing an exhibition on artist books.
Yeah.
And I know you and I like your work.
Yeah.
And would you be willing to, to write? And again, in those days, the art writers were so excited to get work.
Yeah.
And Lynn, at that time, I think she was perhaps still a graduate student, though I'm not sure. I think so, working with Peter Sells. And the exhibition was going to Berkeley,
yep,
where Peter Sells was, and she did an amazing job. Mm-hmm. Neither of those people needed any input from me whatsoever, because they were both incredibly bright, yeah, and had insights into what I had kind of just accidentally tumbled into that I never would have come up with.
Yeah, their essays were quite prescient for the time.
They were marvelous, really marvelous.
Well, and I think you wrote 2 sentences in the catalog, and they were really great sentences because you used kind of the Duchampian prompt of basically, if the artist says it's an artist book, it is. But the other thing that you put in the catalog is that you included everything that you could except for exhibition catalogs and artist portfolios. And as we shared in our conversations, that second sentence has actually influenced a lot of collection development for libraries, academic libraries and museum libraries, in terms of what is included and what is not. And I think at the time you'd mentioned it was mainly due to space that you might have included these other works. So
yeah, but looking back on it, I'm glad I didn't, because artist portfolios most often turn into artist print portfolios, yeah, like Chris Burden's work. They are prints. It isn't an artist book at all. And he would be the first to have said, no, I did not mean I did not mean Coyote Stories as a book. I meant it as, a print, a group of prints. So I'm glad I didn't use that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you didn't do exhibition catalogs either. Although it's challenging. There's a number of places like the Walker and other places that have created artist books as part of the exhibitions that kind of blend the 2 genres that make it very difficult, yeah, or sometimes challenging to catalog. And in terms of the exhibition, do you remember? Curators must have favorites in terms of the works that they have. But were there works that you received as part of the exhibition that you remember that you were particularly pleased to have received or have in the exhibition?
Well, Lucas Samaras' book, it was just amazing. And right, Jim Dine had made a wonderful book as well. So those were like the fancy kind of books.
Lead Deluxe.
Pardon?
Lead Deluxe or something like that.
Yes, yeah, exactly. One of my favorite books was by a good friend, a Viennese artist from the Action School. His name was Alphonse Schilling. And it's a book that I can't even describe in a way that anybody would understand it. It's a portrait of him, and it was sliced 3 ways. So as you went through it, you would get his eyes here and something else. It was just an amazing book. And there was a lot of creativity like that going on. So, but that's the one that kind of sticks in my mind as being something that I really had never seen anything quite like it before. And of course, Ed's books were just, and it wasn't like it was such a big deal to have them, sure, because he wasn't that big a deal. none of us were big deals then. Baldessari and Ed, they were just really, really good artists that people were talking about.
Oh, that's really great. And I know that I think there was when I was doing my research at Moore, the rumor was at the time that Lucy Lepard had lent the largest number of books to the exhibition, but actually it's George Wittenborn, a really great art book dealer. And had you met George in terms of your time in New York City as well?
Well, I don't know if I ever actually met him or not. Yeah. This is 50 years ago. The fact that I can even remember being there is kind of amazing. But I worked with somebody, at Wittenborn's. Perhaps it was George, perhaps not. But it was fantastic that they just let me go through everything, and anything that I wanted, they let me have. So that was really phenomenal.
Oh, nice. So you visited the store in New York and were able to make selections. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Early, I think Wittenborn was Ed Ruscha's first East Coast dealer. And there's a lot of correspondence in the MoMA archives about back and forth about, are they going to raise the price from $225 to $250? And Ed was adamant that they that they make it accessible, but George wanted to raise it 25 cents. So there's some really great correspondence along those lines.
Wow.
Let's see here. In terms of, so we were talking the other day, and you had mentioned, I was kind of emphasizing the networks and the friends of friends and whatnot, and you had suggested that there weren't networks per se, but there was kind of this social connections and these sorts of things, and going to Max's and other places. And you had emphasized that at the time you were, young, and you were making connections and these sorts of things, and really the drive was about having fun. And really kind of enjoying the process, enjoying the experience, and kind of that time when Moore didn't have a lot of support and things were a little scrappier. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of having fun as a young curator?
Well, it makes me sound kind of shallow, doesn't it? Just say it. Because I wanted to have fun. Yeah. Fun for me was, and still is, looking at something that I don't know anything about visually and becoming nourished by looking at it, by the conversations that I can have about it, that the people I can meet and explore it with. So my idea of fun it's not like skydiving or something like that. It's really ideas. Ideas are really fun, and artists are just so full of ideas and originality, and that I could get a little bit of that to rub off on me, was that they would share it with me was just thrilling. So I just kept going.
That's really great. Yeah, well, and I think one of the when I was at Moore College again last February or something like that, one of the items that they have in the archive is a list of all of the exhibitions that you proposed to the board, and it's typed up, and it's a list of the different artists, and it's a very wide variety, right? It's from the record show to the Kachina dolls to Alice Neal and Marisol. I mean, it was really really great list of exhibitions that you worked on. And it was really nice to see that the artist books is kind of just, very humbly, lowercase artist books is included on the list as well, in terms of your kind of seeking out also support for catalogs and these sorts of things. And it seemed like the board was quite supportive, at least on that document.
I'd like to see that. I don't think I've ever seen it.
Oh, all right. I have a copy. I'm sure Rick can provide a copy as well.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you've been to New York yet to see the current Ed Ruscha retrospective.
No.
In that exhibition, they do have one of the 26 gasoline stations hanging by a wire. Can you talk a little bit about? I know you'd mentioned that you were very lightly staffed in the gallery. In terms of the innovations in the artist book exhibition, can you talk a little bit about the installations or some of the things that you did to solve challenges?
Well, the gallery, we were really broke. It took a while before there was any, and there was never really any funding. It was a real bootstrap kind of operation. But I did manage to get enough money to buy those cases that you saw in the photographs. And I sent you a photograph of the exhibition of the Kachina dolls as well. Yeah. So that was probably the best investment I ever made at Moore, because it enabled, so many uses for sculpture, for books, whatever. I didn't have very many choices. I could hang them from wires, but I'd destroy the books. I could staple them to the wall, but I'd destroy the books.
Yeah.
Or the ones that could not be replaced, I would put in those vitrines. Again, I would like to think that I was, clever and creative, but it was necessity. Absolutely, there was nothing else I could do. I didn't want. It was important to me that it didn't look precious. And to this day, when I go to exhibitions of artist books, they seem a little bit precious. Even when at the Venice Biennale a few years ago, when they installed what was it? Jung's Red Books or something like that. Yeah, the Red Book and R. Crumb's book. It was an extremely beautiful but untouchable presentation, and that's so antithetical, really, to what artist books should be. They aren't meant to be the still thing, as John Perrault wrote about so beautifully in his article. They're supposed to be handled. They're supposed to be carried with you. You could put a whole collection of artist books into a shopping bag, he said, or a suitcase. And it was that kind of casualness that I was trying to go after, while still maintaining, that the books weren't going to be totally destroyed. And in fact, they weren't destroyed.
Yeah.
And in fact, I still have the whole collection of Ed's books that I had the audacity to drill holes in all the corners. And they're in very good shape. They didn't get destroyed at all. People, if you expect people to treat things with respect, if you're lucky, they will treat them with respect. So that was kind of the idea behind why I did it the way I did it.
Oh, that's really great. And I know that, in terms of having some under glass, I know that a number of kind of the more deluxe or illustrated books, I think, were loaned from the PMA, if I remember. And so that would make sense for some of those books, right? The slightly higher value books that might be lent from a museum or what have you. A little less populist.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the Oldenburg publication in terms of why Oldenburg? Why not Ruchet or Baldessari or Samaras or someone else? And anything you want to share with us about that, creating that publication, your connection with him?
I don't even remember how I met Klaus, but I've known him obviously forever.
Yeah.
And we were very, very good friends. Mm-hmm. And I told him I was doing this show, and he said, "Oh, I did a book once, my ray gun poem book." Yeah. And he said, "If I'm in the show, I'll do another catalog or another book." And of course, we didn't have a pot to plant our petunias in, so I wanted to say yes, but I had no idea how I would pay for it. But there was an amazing printer in Philadelphia named Gene Feldman, who ran Falcon Press. And I went to Gene and I said, "Would you please do this for nothing?" And he had already done so much for me for nothing. But it was Klaus Oldenburg, and Oldenburg by that time was, to say he was pretty well known is a bit of an understatement. He was extraordinarily well known then. And why him instead of the others? Because he was the first one who asked, and he was there, and it was timing, and that's the way that it went. And I happen to still have, you talked about the sheets, the unbroken sheets. I didn't know anybody else knew about those. Mm-hmm. I have two of those. And I had been with him someplace, and I said, "God, Klaus, those look like wallpaper with the thing."
They do.
And they do. And he was a little bit offended and just signed it, "Some wallpaper, !" Love Klaus. So it was a different time. People were much, much more relaxed about what they do than they are now. Your wife would not have been able to do such work as she's doing now then, because we just didn't do it that way.
For sure. Yeah. Oh no, I forgot what I was going to say about Oldenburg. I think the Oldenburg book is really great, and it's really looking online and I was looking at this myself, and a lot of people who have the descriptions of the book online don't make the connection to the catalog. And so the descriptions are all over the place in terms of people calling it a book or a reference book or a monograph by Oldenburg. It's really kind of all over the place. And so it's really great to make the connection to your exhibition.
Yeah.
When you were, Gene Feldman is in the offset circles, everybody knows him. People involved in offset printing, because he's really well known in Philadelphia for sure, in terms of what he was doing at Falcon Press and kind of coining this phrase of performance with the press, which is similar to another offset printer, Joe Ruther down in Florida, who used painting with the press as a kind of a creative outlet or creative printmaking using a highly mechanized commercial production method. And I believe Gene Feldman was teaching at the PMA. And he also purportedly was the first person to invite Diderot to the United States to come.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So that's anyway. So Gene Feldman is really great, and I noticed he also did the catalog as well. Did he do other publications then for you when you were the director, or does that even go back to when you had your gallery?
I don't remember, but when I started the Vanderlip Gallery, he printed the announcement. Yeah. And when I had a big going out of business sale, and Red Grooms had done this marvelous poster for going out of business, Gene printed that. I mean, he was really, really good to us. Yeah.
Oh, that's really fantastic. I have a feeling that he supported the art scene a little bit in Philadelphia for sure.
Yeah, well, it made for a much more interesting life. Philadelphia is a fantastic city, which I still miss. But it was kind of boring then. There wasn't a lot going on. And Gene was a very adventuresome, interested guy. He wanted to be part of something bigger than his work and make his work something bigger than just being a printer. So he was very smart. You go to the arts. If you want an interesting life, get involved in the arts.
For sure. Yeah. And he was, I think, well known for also bringing in other people from around the world to come and collaborate and print.
Yeah.
So if Philadelphia was a little less lively back then, what drew you and Jay to Philadelphia? Because you were in New York City for some time and you were doing some studies there, and then you came down to Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, let me see. Jay was working with Gordon Bunshaft at Skidmore, Owens and Merrill as an architect. And he really hated New York. He just, some of us loved it, some of us hated it. He really hated it. And many of his friends were in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was a hotbed then for young, new architects. Everybody from Aldo Gergolo, who is not so young anymore. I don't think he's even alive anymore. Louis Sauer, Ricky Werman. And of course, Louis Kahn was the great god. So Jay moved down there, and I stayed in New York for a while. And I was working at a place called the American Gallery, which was my first gallery job. And I didn't like being there without him. So I went to Philadelphia, and the gallery got started in, I hope I have time to tell this story. Yes, gallery got started in a really weird way. Again, it wasn't because I had a vision or I was so clever. I was looking through a magazine, a Vogue magazine, and I saw this woman who I kind of looked like her, and she had on a dress that I probably would have worn. And Jay and another artist were sitting outside, and the artist was Robert Ranieri, and who was also a professor at Moore. They were sitting out in the backyard talking. I took this magazine out and I said, "Hey, you guys, doesn't this look like me?" And they said, "Yeah, okay." And I said, "Why don't we start a gallery?" And Jay looked at me like I was out of my mind, right? Because we didn't have any money at all. And Robert is really a marvelous Italian artist. And he said, "That's a wonderful idea, Dianne. Jay, let's do it." And Jay said, "Okay." And Jay said to me, if you can find a building, I will build it. So we found this building on Sansom Street, and I believe the rent was $120 a month.
Wow.
And it was a wreck. I sent you pictures of it. It was an absolute wreck. And Jay and his friends built it.
Wow.
And we had a couple of friends donate a little bit of money, but basically he built the whole thing. I would not have had the life and career that I have had if it hadn't been for Jay's faith in either me or Robert Ranieri. I'm not sure. Yeah. But he really made it all happen.
That's amazing. And the gallery itself was you had it for 2 or 3 years, right?
I think 3 years. Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah. And a woman named Marion Locks wanted to buy it from us.
Oh.
But I should have sold it. But I just, there was something wrong about selling my name. There was just something wrong with that. And I was the world's worst salesperson because I wouldn't sell to people that I didn't like. I was
I think that's a tried and true model.
Yeah, I was so stupid and so arrogant that I just didn't. And simultaneously, we were running out of money. And at that time, Chuck Fallon, who was one of the artists that I was showing, and who, of course, was the professor at Moore, told me that there was a gallery director's job available at Moore College. And why didn't I try out for that? And I said, okay, because we were really broke. And I went over and I was interviewed for the job. And the man that interviewed me, a very nice man, and this is not dissing him at all, but he said to me in the interview, well, we were thinking about hiring a man because what are you going to do if a 600-pound crate is delivered? And I said, well, what would you do? You get some help. And I mean, it was so strange because it was a woman college and it was such a weird thing to say. But I guess I scared him or something enough that he offered me the job. And when the crates came, we got help. So,
sure. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So you were at Moore College for 10 years. And then from there you went to Denver. And do you want to talk about how you made the decision to go to Denver? It's a great story. In terms of kind of chance and a move against chance by Jay. But I think it seemed like it was a really amazing move for you, and in terms of the work that you were doing at that time.
Yeah, it was. I was getting several job offers at the time, and one of them was a job asking people asking me to apply for jobs, not necessarily job offers. And one of them was in Chicago, and one of them was in Denver. And I said, and the guy from Denver just kept calling, and I would never answer the phone. And I said to Jay, you get it. Tell him I'm not here. And Jay said, I'm not going to lie for you here. And he handed me the phone, and it was Tom Matham, who was then the director, and said, we would like you to come out and interview. And okay. And the interviews in Chicago had already gotten pretty far. And I said, I hung up and I said, Jay, what would you rather do? Go to Chicago or Denver? And Jay was a sportsman, he a hunter, and he was a real tough guy. And he said, well, I don't want to go to Chicago. He was already in a city like that. And I said, well, why don't we flip a coin? So we flipped a coin and it came up Chicago. And we flipped it again and it came up Chicago. And that's 2 out of 3. And I said, okay, we're going to Denver, because he was, and it was fantastic, because Denver, I finally had to get a vision when I went to Denver. I didn't have to have a vision in Philadelphia because it was a different kind of place. But you get into a big museum with a big budget like that, I had to have a vision. And because I was the first curator of modern and contemporary art there, I couldn't wing it. I actually had to write things down and make plans and raise money. And and it was fantastic. I mean, and the training in Philadelphia had been just right for it, because I pretty much got to do whatever I wanted to do in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
When I came to Denver, I still had that kind of confidence that I could do it, but I still didn't know what I was doing, but I had the confidence that I could figure it out. And, writing it down helped a lot. And it was an incredible 30 years, especially for someone who likes to shop. So it was easy to get 8,000 works. So.
That's really great. One of the questions that comes up, so the art, one of the kind of the Democratic Multiple or Ed Ruscha's little books, or a lot of those small publications from the 60s and 70s. Part of the zeitgeist at the time was, that you could create these works and they could exist at the fringe or not in the gallery. They could be distributed by independent bookshops. And these sorts of things. So they kind of exist in the fringe. And also it created opportunities for many people to make art as artist books. And so it was, you could have, these young artists who were up and coming through the 1960s who became very well known, but you had a number of people that were coming into the field and making work. And you had the deluxe books, like the ones you got from the PMA, and it was kind of a real range. But one of the challenges is that very few museums have curated exhibitions of artist books. And, I was wondering if you had any, insights or any thoughts about why that might be, based on your experience, being in Denver for 30 years. And I know you've curated some exhibitions that were similar, about kind of published works or these sorts of things. But I was wondering if you had any insights about why that might be.
Well, backing up a little bit,
Sure.
it's important to note that at Moore, the job was really about the students.
Yeah.
It was really always uppermost in my mind. And doing the artist books show there meant that these kids who probably didn't have much money, didn't have big studios, they could, sit there and, while the spaghetti was cooking, and fiddle around and make an artist book. So it had a reason for being at the Moore College of Art. When you get into a museum, of course, it's a whole different thing. You aren't trying to help anybody in that sense, or teach anybody something that they can do in that sense. But what at least I was trying to do was, we were in the masterpiece business.
Yeah.
And as I don't know who it was, Taylor, somebody said, the goal of collecting is distinction. And that's what museums do. It would have, I bought Lucas Samaras' book. Yeah. It was one of the first things I bought, actually. When I got to the Denver Art Museum. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that in this context, but yes. So I kept up my thing with artist books. But I think I don't think it's about money.
Yeah.
I think part of it is it's very hard to make a spectacular exhibition. And, you worked at the Met, you've worked at these places, and they want to make spectacular exhibitions. Not so much, for money, it's just for prestige and all of that. And I loved it that, the works were shown at the Venice Biennale. I mean, that was kind of one of the first times I had seen them in a public thing like that. Yeah. I think maybe more museums will try to do it, but it's tough to show them. I mean, I went to a Bob Thompson show here at the Hammer a while ago, and Bob Thompson had made books, and there was a lot of memorabilia, and it was all in cases. And I so much wanted to turn those pages, and you can't do it. So I'm very sympathetic to museums not doing it, though. It's a shame. It's left to people like you to do it. Yeah. And I know you've tried.
For sure. Yeah. In a bunch of places that have mainly been academic, small galleries, independent galleries, small museums. Yeah. For sure. Absolutely. Let let's see. I think those are all the questions I had. There was, I actually thinking back to your our conversation about the gallery that you had. One of the things that you also did that you shared with us is you created a number of, I think it was, well, no, the programming was for more, but when you were at your gallery, you commissioned somebody to design a font just for your gallery.
Yeah, Massimo Vignelli. He designed the gallery font for, and Massimo Vignelli, for those of you listening who don't know who he is, he was one of the great Italian graphic designers. He designed the New York subway system map. He designed Bloomingdale's The Big Bag. He was married to his wife. I can't remember his wife's name, but she did all of the plastic dinner dishes that just became ubiquitous during the 60s. He was the best. And I had him come down as part of the lecture series. And I was shameless. I said, would you, this stationery we've got here is really ugly. Would you design me some stationery just for the gallery? And he designed the most beautiful, simple stationery. It was red type, and it was type, so that it wouldn't cost us anything. And, I had it for years until finally somebody came into the administration at Moore and said I couldn't use that anymore, that I had to use the other. At the Denver Art Museum, Gio Ponti had designed our stationery, and another administration came in and said, oh, no, that's no good. We're going to do this. But that's life. It's life.
Oh, wow. That's really great. Well, why don't we see if there's been any questions that have come in through the chat, and maybe Katie can let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you both for that fantastic discussion. I'm just excited that we get to keep hearing from you. I'm going to start with one of the many amazing people that I can see we have in the audience tonight, Phil Zimmerman. He touched on something that he is talking about something that you've already touched on tonight, Dianne, which is that Gene Feldman of Falcon Press did the printing of the catalog. And he was wondering if either Gene or Harry Anderson, who designed the catalog, had input, or if they were included in the exhibition. Sort of related to this, where can we see a list of what was included in the exhibition? So maybe you can take that part, Tony.
Well, I can take the exhibition part, but I think Dianne should answer the other part, because Harry Anderson did design the cover, and it's noted in the catalog. But the catalog itself is really amazing because it includes an entire checklist of every work in the catalog. It includes a list of all the lenders, and then actually, what's unusual is that with the checklist, it includes the lender with the item, so you can see exactly who lent which book, which is really, really wonderful. But maybe Dan would like to say something about the design.
Well, I'm so happy you brought this up, because Harry Anderson is just a great artist. He knew we didn't have any money. We knew we couldn't even get Gene to do like typesetting for this thing, because it would have taken forever. And Harry just did it, and he typed it. He is still working. He's still working with glass, making beautiful lamps. And it's nice to look at that catalog and think of my friendship with Harry for all these years. So Harry, I did send him an invitation to this. If you're listening, here's to you.
Well, that's great. And did either he or Gene help you decide what was in the exhibition, or did they have books represented in it? Okay.
I'd have to look at the checklist to know if they had books represented in it, but no, nobody helped do that.
I can't remember. I know that Harry Anderson did loan at least one or two items, but I don't know if they were his personal books, but I know that he lent books. So
I've got it in my hand. It's alphabetical, so it's easy.
One of the things that we had done is we'd reached out to Primary Information because we were hoping that they would reprint the catalog. The catalog is quite scarce. There's 2 copies on ABE Books right now for around $750 each, which makes it a little out of reach for people who are really interested, and not all libraries hold copies. So that's my appeal to the Primary Information Board if they're on the call.
Yeah, good.
So just to pick up, because you just said Phil's other question was talking about the fact that the only copy for sale is from the Jonathan Hill bookseller in New York that he could find, and it cost $750. And so I was wondering, sort of, going off of that, how important was the accessibility of artist books in terms of price and just widespread availability? How important was that to you in terms of your sensibility as a curator? And, what do you and these artists that you got to know at the time and still know now, what do you make of the fact that they are now sold for such astronomical sums of money?
Well, I'm shocked. I mean, like, who would have thought it? And I think there are probably still artists that are making books that, maybe they aren't selling for, maybe they're selling for $25 instead of, $250 or something like that. I think it's a genre now that most artists mess around with, whether they ever, kind of get it out into their galleries or for sale. But I think it's just remarkable that these old books are worth that much. But, listen, when I go to Trader Joe's, I think it's remarkable what an avocado is worth. So I'm pretty easy to surprise. Does that answer your question at all?
One of the, a few years ago, in conversation with A.A. Bronson, after he'd left Printed Matter, I asked him what an expensive book was at Printed Matter. And he said, generally speaking, most books over $30 or $40, most didn't move so fast. The books that tended to move off the shelves at Printed Matter, and this must have been 6 or 7 years ago, were the books in the $10 range. Those moved quickly, but a book that moves quickly at Printed Matter is also a book that sells once per week. So, that was pre-pandemic, and maybe things have changed because I know they've added distribution staff.
Yeah. I wish somebody, I spend a lot of time at the Karma Gallery here in Los Angeles, and they're very interested in books. And they still, they don't sell artist books per se, but they do have some $10 items like that, but they also have some $500 items. And that's okay. That's kind of the way it is. But I expect artists are still doing it and selling them somehow inexpensively. It's still a fantastic thing to collect, because you can get a whole collection into a shopping bag.
Yeah.
And based on your memory at the time, was that notion, how did the artists that you were working with feel about that? Was that sort of a very important part of why they were working with it? Or did it seem like more of a side benefit that they could sell it to people who didn't have a lot of money?
I don't think anybody ever thought, and I don't recall ever having a conversation about the money and the saleability of the books with anybody. They just did it. And of course, there was no desktop printing, but you could Xerox things. And there were a lot of gifts that were given. I remember, from probably, I can't remember offhand who, but many of the artists would give you their books if you like it. Chuck Fallen, I have, several of his books, and the idea of my buying them just never came up. I would maybe buy dinner. He would bring the book. It was just a different time. Money really wasn't part of it. Money really wasn't part of any of those things that time. Isn't that an amazing idea?
It's a little hard to
From that to cozy, and that's like a big leap money wise. Yeah.
I guess sort of related to that and what Tony was just saying, can you talk a little bit about what your relationship with Printed Matter was and your memories of the inception?
No, I don't I have absolutely no recollection of it. None, really. I know Bronson, he had some works in the show, but no, I have no recollection of it.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's helpful information in and of itself. We have a question from Susan K. Grant, who wonders what the date of that ArtRight issue was, Tony, the 11 or 12 that were the definitions artists sent in to what an artist book was.
I'd have to go look. I'm tempted to run into the other room and get it. It must have been like 70, probably 75, because I think that issue 14 was 76, 77. But I'd have to go look for sure, because I can see from the comments that VSW was founded in 69, not 72. So I was corrected there. But it's fairly easy to do.
Excellent. So this has to do a little bit with something that when we were setting up for the call the other day, I know Tony mentioned that you had sort of lifted that Duchampian prompt in your definitions for the artist book. And then you had some interesting ideas about how monographs may or may not have been affiliated with all of that. And so we have a question from James Holmes, who says, Dianne, the Denver community is grateful for you and owe you an enduring debt for the work you've completed over the 30 years you were there. How important do you feel the modern expansive monographs represent in the appreciation of contemporary art? I find monographs a wonderful way to engage in a wide range of art and wonder if you do as well.
Yeah, there's a whole room in my house that is just filled with books. I mean, they're eating me out of house and home. It's a good question, James. And it's fantastic that we have them. I mean, it's such a joy to pick up that David Hockney big book and, go through, I mean, or a smaller book on Guston and just, kind of whatever. The problem I have with the monographs, and I want everybody who wants to make a monograph, keep making them. The problem is some people think that because they have seen a work in a book or seen it online, that they have seen the work of art, and they haven't. There is no substitute whatsoever for standing in front of a work of art and looking at it in the flesh. There just isn't. In the meantime, those of us who can't, get to everything, and that includes all of us, by all means, buy the monograph, and especially if the artist published it. Thanks.
When I was in graduate school at the Art Institute of Chicago, we had an art history professor that would tell us something similar, but she would show us slides of artworks, and then she'd say, this one is at the Art Institute of Chicago. You should all go after class and go touch it. And some students would actually go touch the works that get tossed out of the museum. But she really wanted us to, every time there was a slide of something that was hanging in a museum in Chicago, she would flag it and have us go look at it in person when we could.
It's so important. And I think that's one of the dangerous things for art that has happened with the media, with the internet, with computers. People are buying things at auction for $1 million without ever having stood in front of it. It's inconceivable to me that people think they can be educated about art without standing in front of it. And you don't have to go to fancy places. Every small community has, an arts council that is putting up an exhibition of their own art or whatever. And even if you don't like the art, it's worth looking at in person because you just learn so much from it. So I tend to go on and on about that. It's a pet peeve I have.
I love it. I'm very grateful for your answer. And it actually is sort of the perfect way, as you were talking about the sort of post-digital experience, to lead into a question from Leah Mackin. I'm so glad that Leah asked this question. It was on my mind as well. She says, Dianne and Tony, I love this insight into the 1970s art scene in Philadelphia. I'm curious if there's a notion of how desktop publishing, accessibility of self-publishing in the 80s to the aughts has changed the notion of the artist book. I like thinking about the offset printers who supported work and the ways that Mimeo, Xerox technologies propelled zines, etc.
That's for you, Tony.
All right. So I think, there's, I don't know, I've written about this quite a bit, but I think there's a real transformation in 1984 with desktop publishing, the Macintosh computer and dot matrix printers. And there's a whole kind of raft of artist book publications from Keith Smith to a number of other artists who use that technology to take control of the printing process, right? If you wanted to do something more than Xerox, a number of people would use their desktop printers to make artwork for films and these sorts of things to kind of, it pre-stage what happened with the internet. In 1994, Conrad Gleiber and Gail Rubini had this exhibition oh no, I'm not going to forget it. It's the book of the future of the book, and the book of the future. Maybe somebody will correct me in the comments. But it was a great exhibition, and they're talking about how the internet at that time, there was all these ideas about how the internet could make the democratic multiple more democratic and more multiple as it kind of expanded into the Netscape browser and these sorts of things. And then, of course, print on demand with Lulu.com in 2002 and Blurb.com in 2003 really shifted the conversation. And a lot of people started, this is when in the early 21st century, people started thinking about artist books as artist publishing as it got into the digital age. And people have kind of gone back and forth in the last 20 years. But I think, there's always that people using the photocopiers, right? And there's been a big push for letterpress in the last 30 years or so, because offset printing is very inaccessible for most people. And then Riso in the last 20 years, or Riso, has been really amazing for bringing a lot of people into zine production and book arts.
Dianne, do you think the development of those and sort of the way that they've changed the landscape in terms of what people come to conceive of as an artist book or what their expectations around them are? Have you found that the artists that you were working with originally that you still know today, have their expectations around the artist book changed based on those sort of countercultural embraces?
I wish I had an answer for you, but I have not spoken to anyone about that. So I really don't know, except that artists always adapt. So in fact, they must be continuing to be influenced by it.
Excellent. This is sort of, I think, just an exciting thing to hear what each of you have to say in response to it. Buzz Spector is here. And he says, here's a checklist of mine about the total conditions of reading for artist books and reading. Number 1, the object. Number 2, the page as hinge. Number 3, the reader's reclining body. 4, sunset, passing time. 5, the doubled life. And 6, the memory of reading. So other than, I guess, sort of treating the audience to that incredibly thoughtful and poetic description, do either of you have any additional conditions for reading or any thoughts on what Buzz shared?
No, that's perfect. Perfect.
Thank you, Buzz.
Excellent. So Cynthia Marsh also says that she wanted to say hi to Tony and Dianne. That you and Chuck changed the direction of her life when she graduated from Moore in 1970. Oh. Moore got an offset press in the late 60s, and she worked as an offset printer in San Francisco and LA until her art career off. She remembers discussing the democratic multiple was a big part of the discussions in printmaking, and she wanted to say thank you. And I think it's only fair to say that her name came up, in fact, when we were preparing for this, and we heard from Tony and Dianne all about that. So it's clearly a lovely and valued connection. Related to that, if you don't have anything specific to say in response to that, an anonymous attendee specifically says, what do you see as the difference between a zine and a democratic multiple?
Go, Tony. I have no idea.
The librarian in me will answer that the zine is generally based off magazine, so it's usually a serial publication. But so it's in series. It'll be volume 1, number 1, volume 1, number 2, these sorts of things. A lot of artists, basically don't follow that convention and use the small zine-like publications, pamphlet folds, stapled bindings to make all manner of very accessible, unlimited or limited edition small works. I think they are probably the closest to the democratic multiple in terms of accessibility, distributability, and the notion that anybody can own the work and it can be made available in theory at a low price to make it accessible in that regard and to a wide audience. The idea about the democratic multiple reminds me of this great story. There was a couple of artists in Chicago in the 1970s, Rebecca Michaels and Miles DeCoster, and one of the things that they wanted to do to get the democratic multiples that they were making to a wide audience, they would use a similar strategy. They would use a phone book in Chicago, and they would just open it up at random. They'd go down, they'd pick an address, and then they would just start mailing their artist books, their democratic multiples, to the random public to get their work out there.
Great.
That was a really great strategy.
Yeah.
It's excellent. And before I ask the next question, I'll just say Rebecca is in fact here tonight, or her name is. So if you have anything to add to that, Rebecca, I'm sure we would love to know. Let's see. Yoshi Hill wondered towards you, Dianne, if after the Samaras acquisition for the Denver Museum of Art, did you continue to collect artist books for the museum or for yourself?
When I collect for myself, no, I don't think that I did. They have a big library, and we were right next door to the Denver Public Library. So no, I did not. I still collect them myself, though.
You do. Do you know about roughly the size of your collection, or do you have any specific things that make a book worth collecting to you?
I have to not have seen it before.
Mm.
You know, it's the same as buying a painting or a sculpture. I'm interested in, in new ideas and new ways of thinking about things. And, I mentioned that big David Hockney book that came out. I had never seen a book like that before. I mean, the quality, the printing, the size, that Mark Newsom had designed the stand for it. I mean, it was just brilliant. And I've been able to afford it, that's what I would have bought. I mean, my house it's not a very big house, and that's very big. It's a gigantic book. So I also didn't have room for it. I might have been able to pull together the funds if they let me do it on time. But yeah, when I see them, I just pick them up.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So we have a question from Nicolette Spear. You've sort of already touched a little bit earlier on the difficulties that there are in an institution displaying artist books. Their particular question is about how damage to the book occurs during an open access exhibition. And I guess I'm wondering, for either of you, have you ever seen an exhibition or a display that you felt like handled that really elegantly?
Handled the installation or the damage?
The installation, I think, in particular, as it relates to walking the fine line between wanting to enable the experience for the viewer, but also protecting the book.
No, short answer is no. And Nicolette, the kind of damage that gets done is it's just unbelievable. People will come in and rip a page out that they happen to like, or they'll let their kid who's got a peanut butter jelly sandwich in one hand and a cotton candy in the other get hold of it and just smear it. The damage is just unbelievable, and the lack of respect for materials in any exhibition is just stunning to me, really. So it's very brave for a museum or a gallery, or in a matter for that matter, to let those books be out on the counter for people to leaf through, because I know they get destroyed. People just like a page and rip it out.
Yeah, that's my experience. I've seen exhibitions that either they'll hang them, or if they put them on a shelf, that's when it seems like I've seen more damage. And also like just dirt, like a lot of people touching books over the course of 4 to 6 weeks, things get smudged, dirty, ripped, these sorts of things. I think usually there's the sacrificial book that's displayed that way, usually in gallery settings I've seen in the last 20 years or so. Usually the curator will say, do you mind if we have a copy in the gallery? And oftentimes artists, if they have extra copies, will volunteer that because they do want their books to get handled, even though they know it's a loss. They take it as an opportunity. But if it's unique or rare or these sorts of things, it's usually under glass.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. There's an outstanding question someone shared. I think I haven't had a chance to look, an interesting link about the Book of the Future between 1994 and 1999, an exhibition catalog. There wasn't a question. It's from Judith Wallace. There wasn't a specific question. But do you have any thoughts on that specific catalog, Tony or Dianne?
I don't know of it.
The only thing to share about it is I think it just sold out very recently. You used to be able to get a copy from Florida State University that was publishing it, and it traveled to Alaska. So there's if people are interested in the catalog, there's one from Alaska, and then there's the one from Florida State. They did a symposium and they had talks in both places, and they had a catalog, and they talked about the impact of the internet on the book and the printed book, and what would the future be, and how could they imagine it. And they brought a number of speakers in. I just use it as kind of a touch point, and it's the midway between, Al Gore standing up and saying he invented the internet, and we know that's not true. But it's so there's desktop publishing in 84 and 94. You have the Book of the Future, and then almost in 2004 is when you see print on demand really take off. And that's kind of the long tail as we get to artist publishings and kind of leave artist books, because a lot of the, at Purchase where I'm at Tyler and other places, Tyler, there's this really great picture of a crane lifting the offset press out of the building. Really by the, late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the offset presses were leaving. Very few schools have them. Art Institute Chicago still has one. Borowski Center in Philadelphia still has one. And they're on their fourth generation of women printers who have trained each other to do the printing, which is really amazing. And then I just learned that SUNY Center for the Editions and Purchase still has an offset press. So
this is excellent history. Thank you. I think it doesn't seem like we have any questions left necessarily. Buzz has another contribution for us, which is that he thinks it's important for the exhibits of artist books to include items to be touched, even if an institution has to print facsimiles, and says also praise for the sacrificial book. If that inspires any thoughts in you, please hold forth. I think that'll be our sort of last prompt of the evening.
I think he's right. Absolutely. They were made to be, that's what it is. They were made to be picked up and handled. And it's kind of like, don't think you've seen a painting if you've seen it in a book. You see a painting when you stand in front of it. You experience a book when it's in your hand. You're feeling it, you're smelling it, you're touching it, you're reading it, you're looking at it. It's a unique experience.
For sure. Dianne, thank you so much for this. This has been really great. And I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to answer all of our questions, and as we coordinated with this in our correspondence, and this has been really great. Well,
I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Katie and Rick for getting this thing off the ground. And Katie, thank you so much for putting up with my losing my emails and all of that, and Rick for tracking me down. I know you even went to the obituaries to see if I was still above ground. And Tony, my God, as I said, you know more about me and my life than I do. So anything else that you haven't shared, keep it a secret. So thank you all so much for bringing me in to relive this fantastic history. It took me back to a very wonderful time. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. This has been great. I cannot thank you enough, Dianne and Tony and Katie, for all the amazing discussion we had tonight. So much interesting history, and highlighting, some of the great things from Moore's past that continue to reverberate today in very exciting ways in contemporary art. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. If any of you happen to be in the Philadelphia area and want to swing by more, you can see a few of the books that were in the original show, including the Alphonse Schilling book you mentioned, Dianne. They are, however, under glass. So it won't be quite the experience of Dianne's, but that show is one in a million exhibitions. So we'd love to see anyone swing by. And again, thank you all for tuning in, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you.